Reinhard van Astria, the strongest sword saint of today, versus Simon, the one whose drill will pierce the heavens. Now I know it's been months since I've last recorded a video, but I'm finally putting off my laziness and I'm trying to come back to making videos again, so I hope that I'll be able to post more, especially with Christmas break around the corner. With that being said, in the past few weeks, I've been seeing this matchup pop up every now and then in a few servers and across things like TikTok and YouTube. And so I want to give my own thoughts on this because from what I've seen, no one has been able to properly scale either side. And I've just seen people weighing both sides or downplay one or the other or just completely disregard their abilities in general. So with that being said, how will this fight play out? Well, in this fight, Simon is going to have access to all forms of Gurren Lagann that have been shown inside the anime and across like other forms of media. So like obviously he'll have like Gurren Lagann, Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann, Dai-Gurren, all that kind of stuff. And Reinhard is going to be going all out. He's not going to be holding back or anything. He's going to be using everything he can. And so with that being said, let's just go in and get straight into the fight. Now, for the start of the fight, I'm going to be covering Simon first because he's a more well-known character out of the two. And so his scaling is probably going to be a bit more recognizable. Now, for those who have either seen Gurren Lagann or have ever heard of Anti-Spiral, which most of you probably have, you guys are probably very familiar with the very famous 10 to 11 dimensions that the anti-spiral embodies. Now, what I've seen is that a lot of people take this statement as the maximum interpretation that the Gurren Lagann verse can reach, and that they only cap at 11 dimensions. But upon further research of the verse, you can actually get this way higher than just 11 dimensions. It was revealed during the Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann versus Anti-Spiral fight that whenever Anti-Spiral did the Infinity Big Bang Storm, he was basically combining 20 existing spatial dimensions that make up the universe into one attack and basically just repeating it infinitely. So basically, he just grabs and uses 20 spatial dimensions as his attack, which is pretty insane because this would bump the verse all the way from 10 to 11 dimensions, or high complex multiversal, all the way up to hyperversal at least. But, of course, as you can probably guess, that's not where they cap either. Because alongside having 20 spatial dimensions, you would need to have at least one temporal dimension to make up for the dimension of time, which would make the cosmology for the universe at least 21 dimensional. And on top of the scaling, you can even get higher because Anti-Spiral has something known as the extra dimensional labyrinth. And as you can probably assume by the name, the labyrinth is basically an extra dimensional space compared to the universe that contains infinite possibilities. And if you were to take this statement of being extra dimensional as it meaning higher dimensional, then you can get the cosmology all the way up to 22 dimensional, but you can go even further. Now, as some of you may know, that there's a whole bunch of statements of Anti-Spiral and the rest of the verse being capable of transcending the space-time of the verse, and since the space-time of the verse would be at least 22 dimensional due to the extra dimensional labyrinth, this would in turn make Anti-Spiral and everyone else who scales him 23 dimensions. And it's even supported by the fact that the final battle between Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann and Anti-Spiral was a battle beyond all dimensions that exist within the verse, which would just further support it. Now, of course, even going beyond the dimensions of the normal universe, there exists something greater than the normal universe, which is known as the Super Spiral universe. And the Super Spiral universe is basically a universe that transcends every previous thing that exists in Gurren Lagann. And so basically, this would at least put the cosmology all the way up to 24th dimensional. Obviously not touching high hyperversal because the verse doesn't have infinite dimensions. But you can even get it slightly higher, which I will be going over whenever I talk more about just Simon scaling by himself in just a minute. Now, to go over for how Simon scales to all this, we all know that Simon is capable of fighting against the Anti-Spiral, but we also saw that Super Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann and Anti-Spiral were capable of turning the entire cosmology of the verse into a void, including the Super Spiral universe that transcends everything. We have multiple showings of Gurren Lagann just being capable of breaking through space-time directly, as like Dai-Gurren, just Tengen Toppa, and like literally everything else, which would just further support the scaling. And now that being said, I mentioned there being a way to get the verse slightly higher, and that is from Otoko Simon. Now, for those of you who don't know who that is, when Simon broke out of Anti-Spiral's labyrinth, Simon was capable of fusing an infinite number of versions of himself into one, which included people like Simon, who exists within a CD, and the CD is said to be the real world of the Gurren Lagann verse, which would, at bare minimum, be higher dimensional to the rest of the cosmology. And since we have the superstyle universe at 24th dimensional, the CD or the real world would be treated as 25th dimensional. And since Simon can just absorb people who scale to it, that would thus make regular Simon scale all the way up to 25th dimensional. And that's about where I'd say the verse caps at. I've seen a lot of people bring up like out-of-versal and high out-of-versal arguments for Gurren Lagann, but it's just not that consistent at all because it's all kind of contradictory, which I'll be getting into whenever I get to the conclusions for the fight on who wins. But with that being said, what are some abilities that Simon has? Well, for starters, Simon can make himself stronger through spiral power, which is just the will of a being. Simon is capable of changing like the destiny and fate in the verse itself, along with having a casualty type 4. And obviously, since there's statements of Simon just being as strong as Gurren Lagann, and that Gurren Lagann is basically just like enhancing him, and is basically just compared to having armor, it would also give him Gurren Lagann's powers, with Gurren Lagann being capable of regenerating itself no matter what, as long as the pilot has willpower to do so, or basically the controller. We also have multiple statements of Simon being able to change reality, as well as having space-time manipulation. With Gurren Lagann, Simon is also capable of hitting targets across all of time, space, and dimensions with his probability missiles. And Gurren Lagann is also said to be capable of breaking through the casualty of the universe. And of course, since Simon and Gurren Lagann share the same things, this also gives him a conceptual manipulation type 2, since he's capable of using spiral power, which spiral power is basically the life force that embodies the entire universe and holds everything together, which would qualify for type 2. Whenever Simon killed Anti-Spiral, a lot of people believe that he absorbed like the abilities of Anti-Spiral, since he just absorbed like his willpower. And if you were to say that Simon has Anti-Spiral's abilities due to killing him and absorbing his willpower, you can argue that Simon has mid-galley regeneration due to Anti-Spiral being able to completely regenerate himself despite the fact that his body, mind, and soul were completely erased by Buta. You also have things like Anti-Spiral having abstract existence type 1, as he's said to be invisible to humans, is made up as an amalgamation of thoughts and has no physical form. Anti-Spiral also has statements that support him having a casualty types 1, 2, 4, and arguably 5, as he operates on a completely different flow of time, lacking a past and future just like Tengensappa Gurren Lagann. And they all completely transcend casualty and the fate of the universe itself. Anti-Spiral also has information manipulation type 1 along with existence erasure, as he was capable of absorbing the information that Nia gathered about the human race and started to erase her physical body. Anti-Spiral also has probability manipulation, just like the probability missiles that Gurren Lagann has, since he was capable of mimicking Gurren Lagann. So he would also just have the probability missiles, which is also during negation, since he can completely control the probability of someone blocking his attack, and they're also capable of manipulating the chances of Team Gurren beating him all the way down to 0. Anti-Spiral is also shown to be capable of mimicking other powers, like I just said, as when he did to Tengensappa Gurren Lagann, with Anti-Spiral also being capable of paralyzing people just by looking at them. And those are all the abilities that Simon would have from himself and both Anti-Spiral. So his abilities are pretty strong. Now, how exactly does Reinhard stack up to this, you say? Well, let's go and find out. As I said in the intro of the video, Reinhard is known as the strongest Sword Saint to have ever existed within the ReZero universe. Now, on top of being the strongest Sword Saint, it is consistently, and I mean consistently stated, that Reinhard is the strongest overall character in the series to where there would never be another character in the series that would be stronger than him. And it is even mentioned by the author of ReZero in a Q&A interview that even if Reinhard were to lose the thing that makes Reinhard, basically his divine protections and blessings, he would still be as strong as he currently is, even without them. Now, since Reinhard is a Sword Saint, he also carries around a sword called the Dragon Sword, which is said to be the strongest sword in the entire world, which further submits himself as the strongest in the universe. Now, you might be wondering how this can help Reinhard scaling, but due to the nature of Reinhard being the strongest character in the series, this will make him stronger than characters like Satella, whose love, yes, love transcends all possible dimensions, which would qualify for at least low out-of-versal to possibly even out-of-versal. And this is also consistent, as it is blatantly shown within the light novels of ReZero, that Reinhard and Satella are capable of fighting against each other, meaning that they would, of course, scale to each other. Now, Reinhard being the strongest in the verse is also extremely important, as Reinhard would be stronger than people such as Regulus, whose authority goes beyond all concepts that exist within the ReZero universe, which you can use to further support Reinhard being like out-of-versal or something. Now, some more scaling you can use for Reinhard is the fact that it's stated that he would be capable of beating Odd Laguna in a fight if Odd Laguna was ever capable of being able to fight someone. And Og Laguna is basically said to have an analogy of being a painter on a canvas, with the canvas that they paint on holding the entire ReZero universe together, meaning that they would have reality over fiction, or R over F over the cosmology, at least on a qualitatively superior scale, since you could literally stack anything up on that painting and it still wouldn't amount to them. Now, with the scaling out of the way, let's go over probably what Reinhard is known for the most, that being his divine protections. Now, to start off with his abilities, I talked about Reinhard having the strongest sword, known as the Dragon Sword. But what's important about this sword is that since it's the strongest sword, it should be capable of replicating other feats that far weaker swords have, such as swords being capable of destroying dreams and destroying the point of anything's concept. Now, the most famous thing about Reinhard is something called divine protections, which are basically things that affect or alters the user's soul, as well as the souls of your opponents whenever you attack them with a divine protection. Now, Reinhard is superior to a lot of people in the verse, as I mentioned before, but he's superior to people such as his grandparents, which include people like Teresia, who is a previous sword saint, who's capable of mastering any sword in battle, and his grandpa Wilhelm, who in his prime was even more skilled than Teresia. And Wilhelm even said that his talent and sword skills wouldn't be capable of even matching Reinhard's. So Reinhard is far beyond anyone who just has a mastery in terms of swordsmanship. Reinhard is also capable of perceiving danger in advance, and he's capable of predicting his opponent's future attacks just from their stance alone, and can see a floating white ray in battle, in which if you were to trace the floating white ray with his blade, it will unquestionably kill his opponent. Now, Reinhard can also use the mana around him in the air to get stronger, and on top of getting stronger just by mana, Reinhard also passively gets stronger during a blue sky. When it rains at night, he gets stronger in the morning, and he gets stronger when he bleeds. Now, on top of this, Reinhard gets passively healed from lesser spirits always following him, as well as having immortality types 4 and 8, as he's capable of coming back to life with the divine protection of the Phoenix, and as well as the very world itself. Yes, and by the world itself, I mean literal planet Earth will not let Reinhard die. Now, Reinhard is capable of adapting to any situation he is in, as stated by the author. When he was questioned if Reinhard just got thrown into space, what would happen, and he decided Reinhard would just adapt to it. Now, Reinhard is also capable of extreme stealth mastery, to the point where he cannot be sensed by others, and even at the age of 5 years old, he was capable of evading detection by guards and other people, and he was capable of easily entering a very secure building by just walking through the front entrance, and then seemingly vanish. And Reinhard's aura is so strong that it can passively cause people to be paralyzed with fear, as if they were trapped in a never-ending nightmare, and his glare is just so strong, I guess, that it's capable of knocking people out. And once Reinhard has seen an attack, he can dodge it at even greater speeds. And Reinhard has a divine protection where any range attacks that go after him, they change their trajectory by themselves to miss Reinhard on purpose. And the same divine protection also makes it so any ranged attack that Reinhard has always hits his opponent. And that's not even the craziest thing, because on top of all of this, Reinhard is capable of receiving any divine protection that he wants, regardless of whether that divine protection for a specific scenario exists within the universe or not. And it's said that his abilities will always be increasing, as in he's gaining more abilities mid-fight. Even as you were to name all of his abilities, it would just continue to grow. So with that being said, who would win this fight between Reinhard and Simon? And obviously, I'm going to have to say Reinhard, because it's pretty obvious that his scaling of low outer versal to outer versal is just far superior to Simon's hyperversal scaling. And I know a lot of Simon fans are going to argue that there's outer versal and even high outer versal scales for Gurren Lagann, but from the scales I've seen, they're just way too inconsistent for two primary reasons. As the first one mainly comes from transcending dimension statements, which obviously would only be limited to the amount that the verse's cosmology has. Like, if a verse caps at 5 dimensions and then they transcend dimensionality, they're only going to be 6-dimensional. They're not going to be outer versal or anything. And the second option is that the people will use the CD or the real world from Otoko Simon that I mentioned earlier. When it comes to R over F with real worlds, you can get something called qualitative superiority, which is basically just granting automatic outer to anything that has it. But the problem with Gurren Lagann having this is that if it did have qualitative superiority, the mainline Simon wouldn't have been able to interact with Otoko Simon and absorb him into himself. So it just contradicts it being out of Versal in the first place. Now, if we were to equalize each character's stats and like give them the same AP, I can still see the fight being a lot closer, but I still think Reinhard would take it just because of the sheer number of divine protections that he has that would be capable of literally counting anything Simon could throw at him. And so there's just like not a lot of options that Simon has to win. Like the only thing I can see Simon winning in like an equal stats fight, where if he were able to somehow physically overpower Reinhard and then just like try and kill him with a Giga Drill Breaker. Besides that, he doesn't really have any other win cons, and Reinhard just has so much more to his advantage. So that being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Please share this video around, and I will see you all in the next one.